Well, moving on to our next story now, it is perceived as a clear sign of progress in ceasefire talks on the war in Gaza. A top-level security delegation has officially arrived in Qatar, and this, of course, for talks on a Gaza hostage and ceasefire deal, according to a spokesperson for Benjamin Netanyahu. That delegation includes the heads of the Mossad as well as the Shin Bet Domestic Security Service, and this means that key Israeli officials who would, of course, need to sign off on any potential agreement are now directly involved. For more, France 24's senior international affairs editor Rob Parsons joins me now on set. Hi, Rob. So what is the basis for this renewed optimism?
Well, you just gave one of the reasons there, the fact that these people are taking part in the negotiations. They've arrived apparently in Qatar. The head of Mossad, the head of Shin Bet, that's the foreign and the domestic intelligence agencies, plus the head of the Israeli Armed Forces Bureau for Hostages and Missing Persons, also there. Those in themselves are a positive sign. Not the first time, it has to be said, that they will have participated in talks. But I think what's significant this time, according to the reports coming out of Israel, is that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, has given them more leeway to negotiate. In the past, he's often been criticised particularly by international mediators, for not giving sufficient freedom of manoeuvre and negotiation to the people he sends to these talks. This time, that doesn't seem to be the case. Why, perhaps, is he doing this? Well, one of the reasons that's been suggested is the amount of pressure that Donald Trump, who's not yet president but will be very soon, is putting on Israel for a deal to be concluded before his inauguration on the 20th of January. Apparently, the outgoing administration in the US and the incoming administration working in tandem to try and make sure that happens. Antony Blinken, Secretary of State, saying he says very close now to a deal. We've heard it before, I have to say, but it does seem that things are beginning to move this time. And one of the reasons may be that there is greater flexibility coming from Hamas. In the past, we've often seen Hamas reluctant to accept the idea of phased withdrawal. In other words, they've always wanted to have the withdrawal pasted in right at the start, so that there should be no opt-out for the Israelis later on. This time they seem to be allowing for the idea of a two-phase withdrawal of ceasefire and withdrawal of Israeli troops, accompanied by a two-phase release of hostages.
So, Rob, as you said, this is not the first time that there's been optimism about the possibility of a deal, which means it's far from being a done deal. So what are some of the obstacles that could remain?
Well, I mean, there are all sorts of obstacles that could still be in the way. And first of all, everything that we're saying about what could be happening at the moment is conditional. We don't know for sure what Hamas is prepared to accept. As I said in the past, they've been very conditional about the withdrawal being the withdrawal being dependent on who gets released, what concessions the Israelis are prepared to make, and so on. This time they seem to be a bit more flexible than they've been in the past. But how far are the Israelis prepared to go is the other question. It's not just a question of how much is Hamas prepared to give. And one of the biggest obstacles to how much Israel is prepared to give is the right-wing composition of Benjamin Netanyahu's government. They have made it clear in the past that they're not prepared to accept any sort of deal that forces Israel out of Gaza. And that is precisely what is being spoken about at this point. So the question is, has Benjamin Netanyahu gotten them on board? Apparently he's been talking to them over the weekend. There's been some suggestion that the position of the Israeli far right is weakening at the moment. That Bezalel Smotrich, the finance minister, for instance, is very unpopular in the polls. There's some doubt that he would even get elected if there were to be fresh elections tomorrow to the Knesset, the Israeli parliament. So perhaps their position is weakening. Perhaps Netanyahu senses an opportunity to make some movement on this. But there are other things as well. About how much is Israel prepared to give on withdrawing at an early stage from the two corridors that it's established, one at Rafah in the south, the so-called Philadelphia corridor, the other, the Netzarim corridor, that bisects Gaza. The Palestinians up until now have been saying, the Israelis have to get out. There seems to be a bit more flexibility on this, however. But what the Palestinians are insisting on is that there should be a right of return of Palestinian refugees who have been forced from the north into the south to be able to go back and to be able to cross through an electronic crossing point. In other words, not to be filtered by Israeli soldiers. There seems to be some give and take on that. But like I've been saying, there are so many conditionals in this at the moment. It's very difficult to be optimistic, despite all the positive signals coming out from the Israeli side and from the international community.
Only time will tell then. Rob Parsons, thank you very much.